Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am discussing the aspects of feminism that I believe are dishonest. As a former feminist, I have the ability to look at these issues from both sides, and I want to be fair and balanced in my approach. Complex problems have a variety of different components, and the solutions are not always clear-cut. However, as I've gained intellectual distance from feminism as an ideology, it's easy for me to see its embedded misogyny in various forms. The first and most obvious lie of feminism is the belief that men and women are essentially the same. It rests on the belief that there are no fundamental differences between men and women other than arbitrary body parts, and for this reason, they should be treated exactly the same. Feminists protest the existence of gender roles, deeming them as unnecessary. While I believe that men and women deserve an equal amount of dignity and respect, and that they are equally valuable in different ways, it's abundantly clear that men and women are very different. Feminism teaches little girls that women can do everything that men can do, but men can't do everything that women can do. If women could really do everything that men can do, then why do they require separate sports leagues? When it comes to certain areas, feminists want to eliminate double standards, but in other contexts, they paradoxically demand them. We know that men and women's brains operate differently. Men and women use different neural pathways. The circuitry in men's brains tends to run back and forth unilaterally, which helps to regulate sensoromotor activity and task-based processing. By contrast, women's circuitry tends to run side to side, which helps with intuition and drawing conclusions. Men's brains produce 52% more serotonin than women's, which helps to explain why women have higher levels of neuroticism. Women prioritize emotional, social thinking, and men prioritize problem solving, which is why men tend to have superior judgment over women. There are many cognitive differences between men and women involving spatial awareness, memory, attention span, and verbal abilities. The differing levels of neurotransmitters and hormones like testosterone and estrogen may also influence the psychological differences between men and women. There is evidence to show that men and women relate to each other in different ways. In voting, for example, women's voting preferences tend to be more homogenized than men's. This means that women are more likely to adhere to the politics of the group due to their high level of agreeableness, whereas men are more likely to draw their own conclusions. In fact, women are more sensitive to conforming to peer pressure in general, and there's a good reason for this. In the tribes of our hunter-gatherer ancestors, it was vitally important for people to remain in a group in order to ensure their survival. If any one person was expelled from the group or tribe, it was essentially a death sentence because humans are not evolved to survive as loners. However, a man had a better chance at surviving than a woman did in the event that this took place due to his increased physical strength and stamina. In nature, humans are actually very good long-distance runners compared with other species, which would have been a much bigger advantage for a man than a woman. If a woman were to be exiled from the group, her chances of survival were basically non-existent. This is part of the reason why women prioritize relationships over all else. A common tactic for a group of women to punish a single woman for various types of misbehavior is for the group to shun her and pretend like she doesn't exist. Women are especially sensitive to this punishment because they're biologically driven to assimilate, and being ostracized produces anxiety for them. Men, on the other hand, have a psychological need to feel needed, because if a man is not needed, then he's just an extra man who is fit to be sent off to war or meet some other disposable fate, unless he can do something that makes him valuable to the tribe. This is why men are driven to be productive and to contribute to society. Men and women experience the aging process differently, mainly because of the differences concerning fertility windows and sexual market value, also known as SMV. Men's bodies mature more slowly than women's, and a woman's peak sexual market value is somewhere between her early and mid-20s, whereas for men, their level of attractiveness may peak closer to their mid-30s. It doesn't always work this way. This is a broad generalization. There are women in their 40s and 50s who have taken care of themselves and are still relatively attractive, even if their fertility windows have already closed. Conversely, there are men who experience the negative effects of aging, such as hair loss, weight gain, and ED, before reaching the age of 40. Despite the existence of outliers, this variance in SMV exists, but is completely ignored by feminists to the detriment of women in our society. Up until recently in our modern history, women were expected to marry and have children by the time they reached their mid-20s in order to maximize the prime reproductive period of their lives. Now, in the U.S. and other Western nations, women are given a life plan as children that is much better suited to men. Women are told that in order to be successful adults, they must spend their most fertile years getting degrees before committing to a career and establishing themselves as adults before even considering marriage and children. As a result, women are postponing these things until they're closer to the age of 30. This strategy works perfectly well for men who remain fertile throughout their lives, but by the age of 30, a woman's chance of getting pregnant declines below 20% and continues to decline. At the age of 40, a woman's chance of getting pregnant is around 5%. We tell women that they have to invest their time and money into pursuing a career because otherwise they would be dependent and reliant on men. There's this idea that it's vital for women to have options in case they marry a man who is immature or who becomes a tyrant. Without a career of their own, there would be no way to escape a marriage with a cruel and irresponsible husband. We also tell girls that getting married and or pregnant too young is not only frowned upon, but it's a wrong and foolish decision because young marriages are often an impulsive mistake that they will later on regret. In either case, the message women receive is that they can't trust men for security. However, there may be a valid concern about immature men. The men of the past matured faster than the men of today because modern society is all about personal gratification and comfort. Modern men are coddled in comparison to the men of 100 years ago. When women started taking on masculine roles and working full-time, the roles didn't reverse. Fathers did not all of a sudden start staying home to be with small children, while the mothers earned a paycheck. The role that was once filled by women has been erased and neglected because it's not valued by society. There is no one at home to make sure the kids are okay. Children are being raised in daycare centers and living their lives online unsupervised and without the guidance of their parents who are both working full-time. A study published by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that while children's physical activity decreased by 18% between 2016 and 2020, the study also found that the number of children diagnosed with anxiety increased by 27% and those with depression by 29%. Another study published by Johns Hopkins in 2022 found that overall, 21.8% of U.S. children have been diagnosed with one or more mental illness. That's 1 in 5 children. In the past, traditional gender roles were implemented by society because the stability and consistency of the nuclear family is what's best for child development. However, after the feminist movement of the 1970s, the focus shifted from the best interests of children to the best interests of women. This is part of the transition towards a gynocentric social order that the West has adopted within the past 50 years or so, which provides a negative connotation surrounding having children because of the fear of a Malthusian overpopulation crisis. Concerns about the future of the environment may also be contributing to the antinatalist sentiment. There's an irony in that despite living in a gynocentric society where the interests of women are held in the highest regard, women themselves are being told that they must live their lives as men do. They must work like men, they must have sex like men, and they must behave like men. Why is this a problem? If we are operating under an evolutionary model, then we must acknowledge that all living things have an imperative to reproduce. The drive for reproduction is what you have in common with a maple tree or a field mouse. It ties together all life on Earth. It's true that not every single woman wants to be or is capable of being a mother, but throughout all of human history, children have been the meaning of life for most people. People have gone to extraordinary lengths to protect and provide for their children. As a woman, I had no idea at the age of 18 if I wanted to have children or not, but by the time I was 27, all I could think about were babies. I would have dreams about being pregnant. For me, the maternal instinct was visceral and fierce. Being a mother is so rewarding to me, and I'm so grateful that I'm able to be one. I know how I would feel if I weren't a mother and had no prospects to become one, and so when I hear the statistic from Morgan Stanley that says 45% of women ages 25 to 44 will be single by 2030, and it's projected that 1 in 4 women will be childless in the future, according to the Institute for Family Studies, I am alarmed by this. As a person with a serious mental illness, I know what it's like to feel desperate to escape inner pain. I also know that desperation causes people to do things they wouldn't normally do. I care about this issue because I see so many women on a path that will lead them to being alone later on in their lives, and loneliness makes people miserable. There are women who are just fine never having children, and I respect their decision. But I believe that most women will want children at some point in time, and that feminism is influencing them to put this off, which is something many of them will live to regret. Choosing to pursue a lucrative career over having children may allow you to have expensive things. You may have a prestigious car. You may have a house or an apartment filled with beautiful furniture. But all that amounts to is a museum of your stuff if you have no one living there to appreciate it. Women crave committed relationships with men, and they're instinctually driven to reproduce with men who will provide for them and their children. I came to realize that marriage is not a form of slavery, as feminism led me to believe. Instead, it's actually a good thing for women and children. It may not be perfect, but it's the best system we have. However, finding committed relationships in today's world is not easy. Due to the influence of feminism, premarital and casual sex has become the norm. I'm not sure if men understand this, but a lot of the times when a woman chooses to be intimate with a guy on the first date, it's not to satisfy some physical gratification, but it's rather to be polite, or the woman is thinking that if she doesn't have sex with him, he won't make her his girlfriend, only to discover afterwards that he never had any intention of dating her seriously in the first place. On the other hand, if she chooses not to have sex with him until they're in a committed relationship, every other woman on the block is willing to, because sexual ethics don't exist anymore. Women knowingly flirt and have sex with men who are in relationships all the time. This reckless and free-for-all attitude is the direct result of the feminist-led sexual revolution of the 1960s, which coincided with the advent of the birth control pill. The consequences of this movement have led to women facing serious problems later on. If women still conformed to the norms prior to the sexual revolution, single unmarried mothers would be rare. But in 2022, nearly 40% of all babies were born to unwed mothers according to the Census Bureau, and nearly 25% of all children are growing up without fathers in the home. According to Warren Farrel, author of The Boy Crisis, children without fathers do worse in 70 different areas. From a feminist standpoint, the high number of absent fathers can be blamed on men lacking the maturity to take responsibility for the children they create. However, blame is rarely or never assigned to the mother for making a poor choice. Instead, feminism views these women as further proof that we live in a society in which men are the oppressors and women are the victims. No feminist is willing to stand up and say, maybe women having sex with men they're not married to is a bad thing after all, because any criticism of the sexual revolution is heresy in the cult of feminism. Suggesting that women should take responsibility for their sexual behavior is blasphemy, despite the fact that women are the ones who pay the highest price for sex to begin with. It may not be fair, but no adult should ever expect life to be fair. Since we as women are the ones who bear the majority of the consequences, it's our responsibility to do something about it. Is it fair that teenage girls have periods and teenage boys don't? No. But it's the girl's responsibility to buy tampons because she is the one who is bleeding. On one end of the spectrum, you have single, unwed mothers with multiple children from multiple different fathers, which is a demographic with a 28% poverty rate. These women face several challenges, including lack of education, working long hours, finding affordable childcare, and a lack of time, funds, and support to raise their children. On the other end of the spectrum, you have women in their 40s and 50s who are single and childless, who have committed their lives to their careers and don't have to worry about poverty. Yet this demographic is associated with the highest percentage of people on antidepressants, according to the CDC. Many of these women have found it highly difficult to find a man who will commit to them because their hypergamy demands that men make more money than they do. However, the problem is that men their age who actually do fall into this category usually have a lot more options due to the difference in SMV between males and females. Now I'm going to talk about marriage. Marriage provides women with some assurance that their children will have a father figure actively in their lives and that they won't be alone later in life when their SMV starts to decline. Is there a 100% guarantee that this will be the outcome? No. Sometimes, for various reasons, men are the ones who seek out divorces. However, this is not the majority of divorce situations. The majority of divorces are initiated by women 70 to 80% of the time. The laws and policies surrounding divorce and family courts act as a deterrent for men to file for divorce because of how harshly these laws typically affect men and favor women. In the event of a divorce, usually the man has a lot more to lose. This has coined the phrase, "it's cheaper to keep her." Feminism encourages divorce because it sees marriage as an extension of the patriarchy and supports the idea that divorce is a way for a woman to break free from a man's control. Some feminists offer an explanation for divorce by pointing out that even when a woman works 40 hours a week, she's still expected to keep the house clean, cook dinner, and take care of the children in addition to working, because there's an expectation that these duties are the primary responsibility of women. This is one reason why feminists want to do away with gender roles. Feminists explain that over time, married women get burned out and they initiate divorce out of resentment towards their husbands for not contributing to these tasks. I think we can all agree that cleaning and taking care of children are forms of work because people are paid to do these things out in the world. But there are still ways to mitigate responsibility and find a work-life balance that works equally well for both husband and wife. I do think that an alteration in traditional gender roles is called for because if both the man and the woman are working full-time, it's appropriate for the man to clean up after himself. There are also a number of household chores that are expected to be done by men, such as mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, and anything that requires heavy lifting or use of a handheld drill. Each couple has to communicate about division of labor so that it's fair to both people. I would say that the reason women feel so burdened in the first place is because of the feminist movement to firmly establish women in the workforce in the 1970s. We must acknowledge that things were easier for women when their primary jobs were to be housewives and mothers without the added pressure to get a career. When women divorce their husbands after being married for several years, sometimes they live to regret it. A woman who is in her 30s with 3 kids is not going to get the same amount of male attention as the former, younger version of herself. The reality is that in general, men are more interested in younger women who don't have children because they're looking to form families and bring children of their own into the world. In fact, it may be easier for a woman's ex-husband to find a new spouse than it is for her. Even though a woman may legally acquire her ex-husband's assets, alimony, and child support, her dating pool will be radically different than it was before she got married. The freedom she may have envisioned prior to getting divorced is not going to be what she had in mind. Freedom should always be proportional to responsibility. We give teenagers licenses to drive, but if they continuously make poor driving choices that lead to car accidents or speeding tickets, we take those licenses away because they're being irresponsible. The sexual revolution granted women unlimited sexual freedom, but it has never held women accountable for that freedom. And we see the results of this in society. Women are choosing to experiment with their sexual liberation in ways that result in single, unwed mothers, sex workers, and divorce. The people who are paying the highest cost for this behavior are children. In a society that supposedly values children above all else, we don't mind letting them drown if it's in the name of women's rights, because heaven forbid a child gets in the way of a woman's narrow scope of self-interest. Promiscuity. Since the sexual revolution in the 1960s, feminism has pushed society to embrace female sexuality and end the stigma towards sexually active women while disparaging sexually active men. It has sought to eradicate societal norms surrounding women's skin exposure in public and champions sex work as a valid career path for women to embark on. A huge contention in feminism is the double standard surrounding promiscuity for men and women. Feminists want this double standard to be completely eliminated. Men who prefer women with a low body count are seen as patriarchal oppressors who wish to turn back the clock on women's sexual freedom, and this makes them adversaries of feminism. It's acceptable for a woman to have extremely high standards for men as far as their height and salary, but it's unacceptable for a man to have standards for women that pertain to their sexual history. However, what feminists don't realize is that women have no say in what men find attractive. Feminism can't change male preferences no matter how much they promote women's sexual liberation. Men's preferences for women are hardwired into them for good reasons. Paternity assurance, lower risk for STDs, and high probability for pair bond formation are important for successful mating practices because they assist to carry on the survival of human beings. Fathers want to raise healthy children that belong to them and commit to women who are emotionally attached. This leads to healthy, well-adjusted adults. Men believe that women are special and they don't want to share their women with other men because it keeps that specialness intact. Men value the privacy of a one-on-one relationship with a woman, and they have every right to do this. It's not the stigma that should change. It's the attitude society has towards licentious behavior. In conclusion, one of the primary goals of feminism is to invalidate the categorization of males and females and blur the lines that define both genders. There will always be variance and overlap between men and women, but there are specific things that a man can do that a woman cannot, and vice versa. No one gender is better than the other, but the differences between men and women are rooted in biology and are reflected in psychology and sociology. Gender roles exist because they have evolved to optimize the unique qualities of men and women, and erasing gender roles will not change human nature. Everyone should be allowed to meet their potential without the expense of specific groups, but to train little girls that they're only valuable if they devote their lives to a career, and that having children should be placed on the back burner, does not teach them to be happy with who they are. It teaches them to strive to be more masculine, because the implication is that something is inherently wrong with being a woman, and there's something inherently preferable about being a man. In my opinion, contrast is a quality that makes something beautiful. Most forms of art use contrast as a way of showcasing something in all its glory as it's compared to its opposite. Artists use colors, textures, shapes, sizes, and shadows to make their art visually appealing. The question I want to ask feminists is this: why are differences so bad? Things which are created with the goal of homogenization are lackluster and muted. Imagine a symphony where every person is playing the exact same notes at the same time without the use of harmonies, differing rhythms, and chords. How can we celebrate diversity when we erase categories of people and refuse to acknowledge that they are different? I want to thank you for watching and listening to this video. I will be including a list of citations in the description below. Please feel free to share any thoughts you have for me in the comments. I do read my comments. I will be discussing more problems with feminism in my subsequent videos. So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.